Okay, this video is going to be for you. If you just got your camera and you're real eager to go out and shoot, or you're a photographer already and you're just looking to up your game. These are my 2 simple tips on how to become a better photographer. Tune in. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome to Photography by Dash. My goal is not to overdo anything, just simply give my viewpoint and my experience being a photographer and photography, behind the scenes content and more. So consider tutorials, behind the scenes content, reviews and more. So consider subscribing. Okay, with all that being said, let's get into my 2 simple tips on how to become a better photographer. Number 1 is learn the fundamentals, and number 2 is learn your scenario. So let's elaborate on the 2. Before we jump out the window and call ourselves a creative, we need to learn the fundamentals of photography. Just like basketball, for example, before you do all these alley-oop passes and dunks, we need to learn the fundamentals of the sport. We need to learn how to dribble, right? So it's the same thing with photography. And with that being said, I suggest you get comfortable with your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO, and how they all complement each other. Okay, now what is your shutter? Think of your shutter as the curtain inside your camera over your sensor that opens and closes every time you take a picture. And it's also letting in light. So your shutter speed is how fast that curtain opens and closes. Now the faster you set your shutter speed, obviously the faster that curtain opens and closes. The slower you set your shutter speed, the slower that curtain opens and closes. Now the trade-off to shutter speed is the faster you set your shutter speed, it's going to freeze motion. The slower you have your shutter speed, you're going to get some motion blur in your photos. So usually around 1/30th of a second and below is when you'll start to get some motion blur, and around 1/60th and over of a second is when you'll start to freeze motion. Okay, so for example, if you were shooting like a marathon or an event with children and moving a lot, you're gonna wanna have a faster shutter speed so you can freeze those moments. Okay, now what is your aperture? Think of aperture as like the iris in your eye. Aperture is the hole inside your camera that's letting in light, which is measured in increments called f-stop. Now the smaller you have your f-stop, the bigger the hole, which is letting in more light. The larger you have your f-stop number, the smaller the hole, which is letting in less light. Our aperture's trade-off is the smaller you have your f-stop number, you'll have like a blurry background in your photos. That's called shallow depth of field. The larger you have your f-stop number, you'll bring more into focus into your photos. So for example, a f-stop number between 1.8 and 2.8 will give you that shallow depth of field. And a f-stop number around 8 and over bring more into focus into your photos. So once again, depending on your shooting situation is how you would adjust your aperture. And lastly, ISO. ISO is how sensitive your camera's sensor is gonna be to light. So the lower you have your ISO number, the less sensitive it would be to light. The higher you have your ISO number, the more sensitive it's gonna be to light. Now, ISO's trade-off is the lower you have your ISO number, you'll sustain more detail in your image. The higher you have your ISO number, you'll start to get grain and a grainy kind of feel in your image. So usually around ISO 1600 and up is when you start to get that grain and that noise in your image. Some of the advantages of having a high ISO number is for creativity purposes. Some people like that grain and noise in their image. Or if you was at like shooting a concert or a low light situation where you didn't have a flash, you can boost up your ISO so you can still get that correct exposure without affecting your other settings, if that makes sense. Now it's gonna take a little time and experience, but I suggest you get comfortable with your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO, and also how they all complement each other. Now once you do that, that'll lead you right into tip number 2, which is learning your scenario. And what I mean by learning your scenario is basically just being proactive as a photographer. For example, an outdoor shoot is gonna require different settings from an indoor shoot. A natural light photo shoot is gonna require different settings from a lighting photo shoot, just things of that nature. And I feel like it's important because this is your craft. This is your skill set. The camera is your toolbox. So it's important to know what you're doing and also be comfortable with what you're doing. So instead of having your camera on automatic and just wishing for the best, you'll have a sense of how your settings should be for each situation. And that'll be you, once again, being proactive as a photographer. But those are my 2 simple, quick, brief tips on how to become a better photographer. You learn the fundamentals and you learn your scenario. Once you learn the fundamentals, that'll go right into helping you learn your scenario. All the boring stuff, get comfortable with it. Learn all the textbook crap, get comfortable with it. Once you do that, that's when you could become a creative. That's when you can incorporate whatever you desire as a photographer. Master those two things, and then I guarantee you your images will get better. I guarantee you the creative spark a start. Like that, trust. I went through this as well. Like, trust me. And I'm telling you, when you get comfortable with those two things alone, your images will get better. I know we're in a day and age where everything is quick, fast, boom, boom. When uploaded now, that's cool. That's them. This is you. Take your time. Take your time with it. Challenge yourself to learn your shutter speed. Put your camera on manual. Learn your shutter speed. Take one day out the week to learn your shutter speed. Take the next day out the week to learn your aperture. Challenge yourself. Take another day out the week to learn your ISO. Take that other day out the week to get comfortable with all of them and how they work with each other and how they complement each other. And then the last day out the week, just try them all. Just go out. Free fall. Do that. Trust me. I did that. Go outside in different situations. Go outside when it's raining, when it's snowing, when it's cloudy outside, when it's nice outside, in the nighttime, when it's foggy. Put yourself in these different situations. Do that. Do those two things and trust me, your photos will get better. That's when the creativity starts. That's when you start to stand on your own 2 feet as a photographer. Trust me. All right? So once again, I hope this helped in some way, shape, or form. If you're new here, welcome. Consider subscribing. I'm gonna be putting out a lot more content. And if you're not new, welcome back. I appreciate you guys taking your time out of your day just to check out my videos. That alone means a lot. So yeah, like I said, I hope this helped. And I'll see you guys at the next video.